Hey, what's up? It's Takumi. Right before your life is about to change, everything falls apart first, and almost nobody can tell you why. Let me start with something you have probably lived through. Right before your life is about to change for the better, everything suddenly gets worse. The money gets tight, a relationship cracks, the plan you were counting on collapses at the worst possible moment, and a quiet little voice shows up and says, "See, it was never going to work for someone like you." Here is what I want you to sit with today. That collapse is not random. It is not bad luck, and it is not a punishment. In my model, it is a signal. It is a sign that a program running underneath this reality is fighting to keep you exactly where you are. I originally did research in quantum physics and related fields at a major electronics maker's laboratory. And everything I am going to share today is built on that background as a former researcher. But I am going to take you somewhere most physicists will not go. We are going to climb a strange staircase together. From one real laboratory experiment, to the idea that your mind leaks out into space, to what this reality might actually be underneath, and finally to the single program that explains why your life always resists right before it shifts. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the last piece is the one that will change how you handle the worst moments of your life. Let me draw this out for you on the board. Start with the experiment that broke my own certainty. The double slit experiment. You fire tiny particles, like electrons, at a barrier with two narrow slits, and a screen behind it records where they land. When nobody is watching which slit each particle goes through, the particles behave like waves. They go through both slits at once and create an interference pattern, a series of stripes on the screen. Peaks and troughs overlapping. But the moment you place a detector that observes which slit each particle passes through, the waves stop. The particles snap into behaving like ordinary little balls, and the stripes collapse into two simple bands. The act of observation changes the physical outcome. That is not mysticism. That is textbook quantum mechanics. Now here is where it gets personal and where I want to be very honest with you. Back in 2012, at a research lab in the United States, a scientist named Dean Radin ran an experiment that still gives me chills. He sat a person alone in a room with a double slit device and simply asked them to aim their attention at it, to mentally focus on the slits, and then to relax and to keep switching back and forth. Then he compared the runs where a human was focusing against the runs with nobody in the room at all. Here is what came back. He tracked a value called the spectral ratio, which is basically a measure of how strongly the light was still behaving like a wave. And every time the person aimed their attention toward the slits in 15-second blocks, that wave-like value dropped. Attention on, wave behavior down, relax, and it climbs back up. Over and over, the curve moved in step with their focus. In plain language, attention seemed to nudge the light away from behaving like a wave and toward behaving like a particle, the exact kind of collapse we just talked about. And it gets sharper. When he lined up the timing, the biggest drop showed up about 2 seconds after the moment of focus, and trained meditators produced a stronger effect than ordinary participants. The more practiced the mind, the bigger the dent in physical reality. Now, the obvious objection is, maybe it is just body heat, or the person's own electromagnetic field leaking into the equipment. So in a later study, he ran the whole thing remotely, with around 1,500 people spread across 77 countries, all focusing on a single double-slit device from a distance, and the same dip in wave behavior still showed up. Now, I have to be straight with you. These results are debated. Mainstream physics has not accepted them as settled, and there are serious, credible critics. I am not telling you this is proven, but in my model, this points at something we cannot just wave away. Attention may actually touch the physical world, and it may not even need to be in the same room. So let me turn that on you. If a quiet point of attention can move a particle from the other side of the planet, what do you think your attention is doing to your own life? All day, every day, without you ever noticing? That question only gets bigger when you look at the next idea. For most of the last century, scientists treated the brain like a classical computer, just wet circuitry. But there is a growing hypothesis, associated with physicists like Penrose and Hameroff, that the brain may actually be running on quantum processes at a tiny scale down inside the structures of your neurons. Tiny quantum activity, deep in the architecture of the mind. I want to be clear, this is a hypothesis, not a closed case. But here is the stranger version of the idea, and the one that matters for you. Some researchers propose that this quantum activity does not stay locked inside your skull. That consciousness may extend, may leak out into the space around you, like a field, not a metaphor, an actual field of mind seeping into the room. Again, this is a hypothesis, but follow it with me for a second. If your consciousness is a field that spills into the space around you, then observing your reality is not just something happening quietly behind your eyes. It is something you are broadcasting all the time into the room, into your relationships, into your life. The mood you carry through a door may be doing far more than you ever assumed. Now I am going to take a detour. I want to warn you in advance because it is going to feel like I am leaving the topic completely. I am not. To explain why your life resists right before it changes, I first have to show you what this reality might actually be underneath. So stay with me, and I promise every piece will lock back together. Look at where we are heading as a species. AI has arrived. We are quietly migrating into information space. We already spend hours a day talking to information-based beings, and it feels normal now. Let me put the trajectory on the board. Bodies, then implants, then artificial organs, then an artificial brain, then pure information. Technology keeps extending the human lifespan. A failing joint becomes a robotic arm. Organs get replaced with artificial ones. One day, even the heart becomes a manufactured part. But the brain has a ceiling. The organic brain seems to have a limit somewhere around 200 years. So to break the 200-year wall, humanity may eventually rebuild the brain itself out of inorganic semiconductors and transfer the memories of the old organic brain across, keeping your sense of self intact. Is that still a human being? We will leave that for the future to argue about, but the endpoint is hard to avoid. At some point, we shed the physical body entirely and move into information space, where life can be effectively eternal. And in information space, you can program any world you want. Picture the wealthy living inside self-designed paradises, building any reality they can dream up. Now push it all the way. Imagine a world so complete, so abundant, that everyone around you is just AI, and there is not a single real other person left. Total, perfect, endless abundance. And in that flawless paradise, something strange happens to you. You get lonely, and you get bored. Hold on to that feeling. Abundance curdling into boredom, because the next step explains the entire thing. Now let me build the staircase of dimensions with you, one step at a time. I want to be completely upfront here. From this point on, this is my hypothesis. Part physics, part philosophy. I am speculating on purpose, and I will tell you when we cross the line. A zero dimension is a point. One dimension is a line. Two is a plane. 3 is a solid, the space you are sitting in. 4 is that solid moved along time, a world with history, a timeline. 5 is when you shift the history itself, which gives you parallel worlds. 6 might be when you shift the observer, when you change who the main character of the world even is. 7 could be a world that governs many observers at once, something like a world of gods. And 8 might be parallel versions of that God world, higher gods sitting above the gods. And in some models, it keeps going all the way up to 11. So follow the logic with me. If the staircase really climbs that high, then there may be creator-like beings, gods, if you want the word, who, for some motivation of their own, built this world we are standing in. I will say it again clearly. This is philosophy, not proof. But why would they bother? Here is the part that reframes everything. From our side, the God world is basically the afterlife. It is a place where you cannot die. Unconditional abundance. You do not eat, but you never starve. You do not sleep, but you are never tired. Every wavelength, every need already included, already met. It sounds enviable, but think about it honestly. It is probably unbearably boring. So they look down into the lower worlds the way we look at a video game. A world with trouble, a world with lack, a world where something is missing and there is the thrill of struggling to fill it. We think a game world is fun, right? But step inside it. For Mario, inside the game, it is one brutal, terrifying crisis after another, falling into pits, dying over and over. A being in total abundance might long for exactly that. A world of lack, just to feel the joy of feeling it again. That, in my hypothesis, is why this world was built. And notice what just happened. We are becoming those bored gods. The future I described a moment ago is the same story told from the other end. The loop closes. So if you were going to build a world like that, a world for beings who are starving for the feeling of lack, what is the very first thing you would program into it? You would program a scarcity maintenance program. A rule that quietly resets every being back toward lack. That is why hunger always comes back, so that food tastes good again. That is why tiredness always returns, so that sleep feels sweet again. The lack is being reset on purpose again and again, so that the feeling never stops being enjoyable, which means this world may be governed by one quiet, relentless law. Everything drifts back toward lack. And now, finally, we can answer the question we open with. Why does your life get worse right before it changes? Let me put on the board as a simple curve. Resistance spikes the hardest right before the shift. Because the moment you actually start to leave your old level, the scarcity maintenance program pushes back with everything it has. It is doing its job. It is defending the exact setting it was built to hold. So the collapse you feel right before the breakthrough is not failure. It is resistance. It is the program protecting the old world. And here is the trap, told in the language of that first experiment. In that moment of collapse, if you panic and reobserve the old reality, if you stare at it and say, see, I am still broke, still alone, nothing has changed, you are measuring the old branch all over again. And just like the detector at the slits, your observation collapses the wave of possibility right back onto the timeline you were trying to leave. You lock yourself back in at the worst possible moment. So how do you recognize this moment when you are inside it? Let me give you the signs that the scarcity maintenance program is pushing back hardest. Things suddenly get worse for no clear reason. Relationships strain and certain people quietly drift away. A wave of loss or grief or fear shows up out of nowhere. The loudest version of the voice that says, I cannot do this anymore. And a dead, stuck, stalled feeling that lands right before a breakthrough. If you are feeling several of these at once, I need you to really hear this. In my model, this is not the end. This is the single clearest sign that the shift is close. So here is exactly what to do while the program is testing you. 3 things. 1. Reread the collapse as evidence. The worse it gets, the closer the branch. Stop treating the resistance as a verdict on who you are and start treating it as a mile marker. 2. Do not reobserve the old reality. When the panic whispers, look how bad it is right now, understand that looking, fixating, rechecking the old world is the measurement that locks the old branch back in. Refuse to spiral. 3. Hold the new state as if it is already real. Be the observer who keeps attention steadily on the world line you have actually chosen. Calm, settled, as if it is already done. So the next time everything falls apart right before it changes, I want you to have one line ready. Say it with me. This is the test before the timeline shifts. I hold steady. I do not collapse the old world. Drop that line in the comments and make it your own. I read them, every one. And there is something genuinely powerful about a whole room of people holding the same line at the same time. And if this reframed the worst moments of your life even a little, subscribe and turn on the bell. Because next time I am going deep into the experiment they quietly tell you to ignore and what it really says about who is observing your reality. Until then, remember, when it gets worse, that is the test. Hold steady and do not collapse the old world. I will see you in the next one.